All right. You
Hey.
over the flowers.
Where did you come from?
I came out through the flower bed.
Oh,
Apparently. Yeah, you're cool. We are back.
we are back. Haven't seen you in like a month of Sundays. Yeah.
We've had a short hiatus, but we're here for session 68.
68. Let's get going.
Yeah.
In the last couple of letters, KH has been discussing with Sinnett the state of affairs regarding Mr. Hume, who is basically mad with anger, hell-bent on destroying the Theosophical Society, belief in the masters. He's writing letter after letter to existing Theosophists in London and to potential members, people who are expressing interest and trying to tell them, stay away, it's not what it claims to be. So he's turning into a real powerful enemy of the movement. Now he's going to continue, but in a different vein. This is letter number 102, received at Allahabad in January of 1883. This is the period of time where Sinnett has decided definitely to go back to London for a time, and he's making preparations and trying to decide when to make that happen.
We get right in?
Yes.
Buckle up if you're not. Just warning you. It is my turn, kind friend, to plead for lenient treatment of Mr. Hume. And of course, this is KH writing. Yeah. And I ask you to give me a hearing. You must not overlook an element which has much to do with his moral depravity, one which certainly does not excuse his offense, although it mitigates it to a degree. He is pushed on and half maddened by evil powers which he has attracted to himself, and has come under subjection to by his innate moral turbulence. Near him lives a fakir who has an animalizing aura around him. Wow. The parting curses of Mr. Fern have produced their effect. And while his own self-described adeptship is entirely imaginary, he has nevertheless, by the injudicious practice of pranayama, another wow, developed mediumship in himself to some extent and is tainted for life with it. That deserves some explanation there.
Tainted for life with it. Yeah, so he prematurely, through practicing pranayama, opened up some of his ability to see or perceive on other realms other than those normally we have access to. So he's somewhat psychic, but he has done none of the preparatory work, no purification whatsoever. His ego is still gigantic. His need for revenge on people he disagrees with is still huge. And this is exactly why doing that prematurely is extremely dangerous.
And now let's remind ourselves, and now we've said this a lot of times in our sessions here, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and other yogic texts describe pranayama as being important to practice. It all depends on the type of pranayama and the teacher that you have and the techniques that you're doing and the intentions behind the techniques. Controlling the breath is not only important, but it's required to vivify your body, your aura. It's prana. You're increasing your pranic storage by breathing. We're not referencing safe pranayama. We're referencing extreme practices of pranayama with extreme breath retentions, rapid breathing, adding mental kriyas intending to direct energy in a potentially malicious way, but the practitioner doesn't think it's malicious, of course. That's what we're referring to. Anything in excess can be dangerous and harmful. That's what we're referring to here, not just breathing.
And if you have a teacher who is recommending some of these practices, the first thing to do is to examine that teacher very, very carefully. Are they completely moral?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have very high ethics? Do they have a great love for humanity? Or are they very self-centered? Do they have a big ego? Are they more interested in getting more subscribers and more likes than in anything else? If they haven't put into practice the same purification processes that we need that come from Raja Yoga, I would stay away from them personally. It isn't worth the risk that you would be taking.
If you're at all curious about this, please check out some other videos on this YouTube channel. There is a section on guided breathwork and meditation where I lead a lot of practices that, of course, I believe that are safe, that are intending to calm the mind and bring about this sense of samavritti, which is even fluctuations of the mind. We love the Yoga Sutras. Patanjali, the main objective is to calm the mind so we can transcend the mind. And calm, controlled, even inhales and exhales is one great way to do that. Very simple, very tangible. Breathing in for the same amount of time as breathing out. A 4 or 5 second duration is one that you can try. 6 or 7 or 8 seconds can be good as well. And then if you're in a situation, a yoga class or practicing with a YouTube video, maybe be aware of any breath retentions. You can hold the breath. It's called kumbhaka. Calmly, mildly, moderately. If you're being asked to hold the breath for longer than your body is comfortable, that's when what Terry just said, be discerning on that. If you feel like you need to breathe, stop the technique and breathe and go back to calm. Even there's also alternate nostril breathing that helps balance the physical brain, and it brings a sense of yin and yang balance to your nature. So there are very worthwhile pranayama practices. We're referring to things that are extreme here. That's where the caution, the red flag goes up.
And never try to force it.
No.
If you feel during meditation and during a pranayama exercise that you're right on the verge of something bursting through, be extremely careful, because normally it doesn't happen that way. If it is natural, it's going to happen slowly, and it will be just like a flower opening, not like you have to force your way through an opening.
That's a beautiful analogy. Yeah.
So if it is something that requires too much effort on your part, back off. You have all the time in the world. And we know people who have ruined their chances for this lifetime and a future lifetime. Mr. Hume is one of them. We learned last time he ruined his chances in this life, in his next life, and possibly in the one after that.
It
isn't worth it.
No, it's not worth it. It is challenging to see that and recognize that. We believe that is absolutely what happens. It's more obvious to see someone who's harmed themselves mentally or physically. And we have several examples of that. You can go kind of insane. It's like being struck by lightning almost if you force these practices.
It is exactly like that. It's like being thrust into a different realm of action and seeing and feeling things with no preparation for it. Here's what happens. If you're being trained by one of the Mahatmas, they do not teach you to see on the astral plane. If you've got somebody who's saying, oh, I can teach you how to become clairvoyant, run away. What they do is they spend years. That's why he said it takes 10 to 15 years for them to learn it. And it's not because it takes that long to learn the process. It's because the preparatory steps are so crucial. If you haven't purified all of your other koshas, you're going to have problems. So what they do is they teach them over a long period of time very carefully how to see on the higher levels, not on the astral plane. Seeing clearly and accurately on the astral plane can only happen after you've had all of this other training. Then you can do that accurately and safely. But until then, you're taking great chances.
And the reason for that is the astral realm is the place that emotions exist. Emotions are what cause the problem, whether you're being attracted towards something or repulsed or repelled by something, drawn towards, pushed away, attracted to, tempted by, scared by. That all takes place in the world of emotions, which is the astral realm. The higher planes, the mental realm, and deeper levels, emotions don't exist there. Only facts, if you will, on the lower mental, but then it's not emotional. It's clear seeing, harder to develop. And unfortunately, we're coming at this from a disadvantage. We're like the underdog here because most of the spiritual modern day world promotes astral projection, light your purple flame and do this and that. And it's sexy and cool. And let's learn how to plane the astral fields when you sleep. But that's exactly what we're saying not to do. But it's so attractive and it's everywhere.
The astral plane really isn't attractive. It is filled with anger and resentment and retribution and people who have these really huge bursts of emotions. And that's the overwhelming part of the astral plane. Why anyone would want to spend extra time in that, I don't know. But a lot of people find it attractive. It's because it is the plane of glamour. It's excitement. And it's all 100% created by people's emotions. 100%.
One point of clarification before we move on, and I know we've sidetracked a lot here already. The parting curses of Mr. Fern have produced their effect. Now, is that referring to the fakir who lives near Hume?
No,
it's a
that's
little confusing.
the young guy that was his
Fern.
secretary.
Oh, I know who Fern is.
But he was clairvoyant, and he had enough training, not through the Mahatmas, but on his own, that when he issued a curse, it had some power.
But who were his...
So there is some kind of a fakir that lives near him in Shimla, and who is a very negative individual. He is a Dugpa, and he obviously is aware that Hume has opened up this connection to the astral plane, and he's like, aha, look who I can influence now. And he is doing exactly that.
So, but who did Fern curse?
He cursed Hume because, remember, Hume was spying on him and was using his key to get information on Fern and then use it against him. So, yeah, he put a curse on Hume when he left. It
was just confusing because it says, near Hume lives a fakir who has an animalizing aura, and then the parting curses of Mr. Fern have produced their effect.
Right, that they opened up this connection between this fakir and Hume, because that fakir can see anyone around him who he can influence.
And Hume's self-described adeptship is an entirely imaginary, obviously.
Right.
And it's sad that he's been tainted for life. Okay, moving on. Hume has opened wide the door to influences from the wrong quarter. And quarter just means place, area, right?
Right.
The wrong area. And is henceforth almost impervious to those from the right. Yeah. Right meaning the correct, and right probably meaning the right-hand path.
Right.
Right means
exactly.
both.
And in this case, left means that you're on the path to Dugpa-ship and to Avicii if you keep going far enough.
So he must not be sweepingly judged as one who has sinned with deliberation. It's almost like when someone pleads insanity and they actually are insane to a certain degree, you can't really hold them to the same standards as someone who's fully conscious.
Right.
Unfortunately.
And once again, this shows their compassion.
Yes.
They never, ever want retribution against anyone who curses them or hates them, ever. do they try to use that against them? They have always compassion for every single human being,
That's
no matter
such
what.
a beautiful thing. If we could all operate like that, the people who are mean to us or evil to us or evil to other people, if we could not just need to get revenge and just let them do their path. Of course, we can protect who we can, but this is amazing. And also, we know that Hume does have conscious intention to harm them. There is that. And he's being fooled and tricked at the same time by the glamour in the astral world.
So,
Yeah.
KH is asking Sinnett, please not only be careful with him, but have some compassion. He has been driven mad by his anger and his resentment.
KH says, avoid him, but do not anger him still more, for he is more than dangerous now to one who is unable, like yourself, to fight him with his own weapons. Wow.
Yeah, Sinnett is poorly armed to come up against anything, so just stay away.
Wow. It suffices that you should know him as he is, and thus be forewarned and prudent in the future, since for the present he has succeeded in spoiling our plans in the most hopeful quarters.
Yeah, so he's doing everything possible to throw obstacles in the way of HPB and Alcott and the Mahatmas. He's like, I'm going to mess them up.
He is now in his days of the most selfish vanity and combativeness, during which he is capable of doing most desperate things, and they will extend for weeks and perhaps months. So think twice, my good friend, before you precipitate a crisis whose results might be very severe. My goodness.
So he's saying this energy that he is spewing and throwing at us does have a limit. He will eventually start to deplete that. But in the meantime, you have to be really careful.
As regards his connection with theosophical matters, he is largely your chela, but since you have thus acted under my own instructions, I take the blame upon myself, the whole blame.
Yeah, this is amazing. He's like, I'm going to take all of the karma that came from that.
If you were to hear that he's the chela of Sinnett, he would explode.
Yes, he would. He absolutely would.
No way.
He's not anywhere close to my equal.
I'm an adept.
Yeah, you're right. Egos.
Yes. Understand me well. I would not allow a single speck of the present disastrous result to taint your karma. Wow. So he's offering him some protection and a warning. But the latter is a thing of the future, and in the meantime, he can cause problems to yourself and the society.
So this is one of the few times when someone else can actually change your karma. And it's very rare, but when they work with their chelas, and he said this before, they sometimes accept responsibility for some of the results that occur because they are asking these people to go through a forcing process and to go much faster than normal. And that creates some stress and some mistakes. So sometimes they will take that karma on themselves and not make that individual suffer for it.
Wow. It costs you no little trouble to get him in, and now you must beware how you prematurely throw him out. For you have seen from his correspondence what malice he is capable of, and how industriously he can work to breed suspicion and discontent so as to center interest and loyalty upon himself. Industriously, I like that word. Yeah, he's feverishly writing all these letters and actively trying to...
Yeah, and again, he wants all of the attention and glory for himself, and so he's really angry that his plans did not work out.
The TS has just made it safely through a tempest raised by another vain and ambitious troublemaker, Dayananda Saraswati. And if the outcome has been favorable, it is because Dayananda has a short memory and was made to forget all about the documents he had issued.
This is funny. The Swami has a short memory, and the Mahatmas used that to their advantage. They caused him to forget about some of the documents that he had created. And I guess that would be messing with his karma, but they know what they're doing. I wouldn't dare do it.
It would be prudent then to wait and watch and lay aside the materials for the defense against the time when this new iconoclast will, quote, charge upon your entrenchments, end quote. If he ever does, which up to now is not certain, but which would be almost inevitable if he were suddenly denounced by you. Now, we're still talking about Dayananda, right?
No, he's talking about Hume.
Okay, now he's, okay.
So he's saying if you try to throw him out prematurely or denounce him,
it'll be bad.
It's going to be terrible.
Right. I do not ask you to display friendship for him, but I would strongly advise you not to even write to him for some time to come, and when pressed for an explanation, ask your good lady, of whom he is afraid and whom he is forced to respect, to tell him bluntly and honestly the truth, in a way only women are capable of. But I simply ask you to postpone an open break until it becomes inevitable.
That's funny that Hume is afraid of Mrs. Sinnett.
Wow.
We'll show a photo of her, and she does have a demeanor that Hume might be afraid of. She looked like a real no-nonsense woman.
Wow. Huh. I do not ask you to display friendship. So I asked you last session, what is their relationship right now? Sinnett and Hume, and it's obviously...
There's a big break.
So Hume is aware, obviously, that Sinnett is not cool with him at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So,
yes, absolutely.
So there is a definite break. It's not like only on one of their parts and not the other. They both realize that there's a huge rift. They both acknowledge it, obviously.
Yes.
Okay.
And Hume is still not giving up on his trying to sway everything. He's still going to write some letters to the Mahatmas. He's still going to contact Sinnett in the future. But right now, Sinnett is being told, just lay low, keep things quiet, and maybe all of this will burn itself out.
It seems like keeping quiet would be easy, though. If both acknowledge that they're not cool anymore, Sinnett might not have to offer an explanation to Hume as to, why haven't you been talking to me? Well, it's obvious why at this point.
And they're in different cities now.
Yeah.
He's back. Sinnett is back in Allahabad. Hume is still in Shimla. So it's easier to avoid him.
Neither of us ought to imperil a cause whose promotion is a duty paramount to considerations of self.
Yeah, that's their number one goal, is the society and its success. And getting this valuable information to the Western world, which is proving to be extremely difficult.
They're realizing that. I must not close my letter with this bleak image, but tell you that in Madras, there are fairer prospects of success than in Calcutta. Calcutta has a different name now, right?
It's just spelled differently. It's
K.
Kolkata. It used to be pronounced Calcutta, but it's Kolkata.
We haven't heard of that city much in these letters, but that's one of the biggest cities in
the
world, isn't it?
In India.
In India, for sure.
It's a very large city, and it's way over on the East Coast, so it's kind of separated from all of the other activity.
Okay.
And there was some theosophical activity going on. That's where the Gordons live, remember?
Okay.
So there is activity going on there, and it's a huge metropolitan city. Okay. But he's saying that our prospects in Adyar, in Madras, are much greater now than they are in Calcutta.
In a few days, you will hear the results of Subba Rao's work.
And he's in Madras.
How do you like Mr. Isaacs?
This is a book. Keep going.
As you will see, for you must read and review it, the book is the Western echo of the Anglo-Indian occult world.
So it was actually inspired by Sinnett's book, The Occult World, and by all of this information disseminated to the people in London about his connection with the Mahatmas and who they are and how they do things. And the Western world is completely enamored with this, but they're also a little bit standoffish and saying, who are these people that you're dealing with?
The ex-editor of the Indian Herald has not quite grown up to the size of the editor of the Pioneer, but is headed in the same direction. The cruel enemy of 1880 to 1881 is turned into a quasi-admirer in 1882.
And he's referring to the fact that some of the characters in this book are based on real individuals. In fact, K.H. is one of those people.
I think it is rather hard for people to see K.H. Lal Singh reflected in Ram Lal, the all-gray adept of Mr. F. Marion Crawford.
Yes, so he chose to represent an adept, and we'll take a look at that in a minute, who was based on K.H., obviously.
Had the book been written a year ago, I might have said the author was himself gray when making Ram Lal talk of eternal love and bliss in the realms of the world of spirit. But since a certain vision procured for him by the famous Ski, in whom Mr. C.C. Massey does not believe, the man gave up drinking entirely.
And I don't know if that's C.C. Massey that quit drinking, but I assume it is.
One more man saved. I forgive him my very gray appearance.
So, yeah, this author, Francis Marion Crawford, actually was intrigued by the idea of the Mahatmas, but he was also a little bit repelled by the way they seemed not so sympathetic with the everyday outside people who were so enmeshed in all their emotional drama. And he seems to be quite aloof from that. And he thinks that makes them somehow less attractive and not as good of people as perhaps he thinks they should be. So the book had just come out recently, and it was called Mr. Isaac's A Tale of Modern India. And the author was an American, Francis Marion Crawford. And there's an interesting connection directly with Theosophy. The author's uncle was a Theosophist. His name was Sam Ward, and we'll hear about him from time to time. HPB used to call him Uncle Sam because he was an American and his name was Sam, so Uncle Sam. And he was a pretty good member, but his nephew was caught up in all of this drama of what was going on with the Theosophical Society and these adepts. So just a quick overview of this story. It is told through the eyes of an American, a Mr. Paul Griggs. He's spent a lot of time in Europe, so he's well versed with European ways. And he encounters a man named Mr. Isaacs. His real name, though, is Abdul Hafiz ben Isaac. He's a merchant of extraordinary presence and influence. And he grew up in slavery, but became very wealthy. And now he has learned of these adepts, and he's intrigued with this spiritual life that they have. Now, this Mr. Isaacs, being a Muslim, has 3 wives already, but he falls in love with this American woman. Yeah, very romanticized story. So he falls in love with Miss Westenhow, and their connection challenges societal norms, aided by Islamic provisions that allow easy divorce. And so it has all of these different elements in it. But his guru, or the man he admires, is this Ram Lal, who is based on KH. And he's very stern and all gray because he's colorless and doesn't show much emotion. And one of the big highlights of the story was a tiger hunt. Mr. Isaacs was going on this tiger hunt, and this woman he was in love with, and hoping that she would also fall in love with him, it had been predicted that it would not be well for her to go on this lion hunt. But she went anyway, and it was obviously Ram Lal that made the prophecy, and she came down with a fatal illness. And the book kind of calls the KH character cold and indifferent because he's just sort of like nonplussed about the whole thing instead of being all upset. So obviously it was karma, but the author didn't see it that way. He just saw it as a way to criticize Theosophy and their belief in these Mahatmas who were so divorced from the real world. Anyway, it was one of the big things that was being talked about in India at the time. All right, let's get back to the letter.
I didn't finish the closing salutation. It's the same that KH normally closes his letters with, yours affectionately, KH. That wasn't a very long letter. That was,
No.
Was a lot redacted? Did you take a lot out of that one? Oh, okay.
Yeah. This portion took a lot of work because we're going to get into a different realm now, and there are some interesting aspects to it, but there's a lot that we don't have the background for. So it's somewhat mysterious, and we're going to kind of run through the narrative here and just make some comments here and there, but we're not going to dwell on the actual story of what's going on. It has to do with mediumship. So this next letter was actually sent to Colonel Olcott, a very short message from KH, and he's advising him to send that note along with an explanation to Sinnett. So go ahead and read number 103A.
Message received by Colonel Olcott, January 1883.
At Adyar. So they, the previous month, had moved from Bombay to Adyar.
Read the enclosed from CCM. Call upon your memory, and then tell Sinnett the whole truth about the message which I gave you in London about the 100 pounds in Mrs. Billings and Upasika's presence. Do not forget to state the conditions under which I spoke.
Now, again, we
KH.
know nothing about the story, so we're going to not dwell on that. All I will say is that 100 pounds in 1883 would be worth about $21,000 today.
That sounds like a lot, yeah.
Yeah, so whatever the story was, it was not an insignificant amount of money. All right, next is letter 103B, which is from KH to Sinnett again.
I got out the letters of CCM and yourself and gave the former to Mr. Olcott to answer. Thus, half of the damaging accusation is disposed of and explained away naturally enough. Poor woman.
And he's talking about HPB.
Incessantly and intensely engrossed with one overwhelming thought, the cause and the society. Even her carelessness and lack of memory, her forgetfulness and distraction, are viewed in the light of criminal acts.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, no matter what she does, she's wrong.
He's exaggerating by saying criminal. They're not actually illegal.
Right, but he's saying everybody misreads her and attributes nefarious motives to everything she does.
Terrible. I have once again osmosed. I love that. Is that, he made up a word. I love that.
It is, yeah.
Osmosed. I love it. The act of, the past tense of osmosis.
Well, it's the verb
Or
of
yeah,
the process of osmosis.
I osmosed. That's hilarious.
Yeah. It's interesting because osmosis has to do with making something pass through very, very fine membranes with tiny, tiny holes. So he is using his powers to extract from an envelope someone's letter.
That's amazing. I have once again osmosed his answer to return it with a few more words of explanation that should come from me. The deduction of Mr. Massey that, quote, the adept foresight was not available in various noted cases of theosophical failure is just the restatement of the old error that the selection of members and the actions of the founders and chelas are controlled by us.
Yeah, so many people think that the Mahatmas control everything, and they do somewhat, from our point of view, micromanage things, which seems a little strange, but I'm not going to second guess how they tried to do things in the 1800s, because it was an uphill battle trying to get this information to the Western people, and the difficulties they encountered were stupendous.
You know, I haven't actually had the thought that they micromanage. I can see why people would think that. There are certainly a lot of specific things they ask to be done in a very precise way for reasons, and we don't need to know their exact reasons, but they also, on the flip side, usually don't do that. They usually give the general intention and say, go forth and conquer.
Right. There is a bit of a dichotomy here.
Right.
Dual way of operating.
And people like myself, I usually question, well, why do you want me to do it exactly that way? Couldn't I do it? But that's what we don't need to question, because they have reasons. They wouldn't waste their energy being so specific on things if there wasn't a precise reason for it.
Yes.
This has been denied frequently and, I believe, sufficiently explained to you in my Darjeeling letter. But objectors cling to their theory despite everything. We have no concern with events generally, nor do we guide them.
Except that they do sometimes.
It's one of his caveats, I guess. Take the series of names he quotes, and you will see that each man was a useful factor toward producing the net result. Hurrychand drew the party to Bombay, and if they had prepared to go to Madras, it would have been fatal at that stage of the Theosophical movement. Wow. Edward Wimbridge and Miss Rosa Bates gave an English complexion to the party, and from the beginning caused a bitter journalistic assault upon the founders, which brought a reaction.
So, yeah, from the very beginning, things were kind of dicey. When HPB and Alcott were getting ready to leave New York City and move everything to India, they were trying to prepare ways so that they would be able to get established and start operating quickly. And there were 2 English members of this society in New York City at the time, and they said, "Oh, we'll go with you." And they thought, well, that'll be great because we're going to a country that is under British rule, and these are British citizens, so maybe that would be a good connection. Well, it turned out to be the opposite. If they had arrived as Americans in India, they probably wouldn't have attracted the same type of attention. For one thing, the natives probably would have been more open to them as Americans than they were when they came with these British people. They're like, oh, great. They're in cahoots with the British, and yeah, do we trust them or do we not trust them? So in a way, it was a bad decision, but that was one case where they're left on their own, to their own devices.
Dayananda stamped the movement with the impress of Aryan nationality. And lastly, Mr. Hume, who is already the secret foe and may become the open foe of the cause, has aided it greatly by his influence and will promote it more despite himself by the secondary results of his defection. In each instance, the individual traitor and enemy was given his chance, and if it were not for his dishonesty, might have derived incalculable good from it to his personal karma.
Yeah, so both of them, Dayananda and Hume, were given tremendous opportunities, and both of them failed miserably. So if you're going to try it, be very careful because it can increase your karma immeasurably.
Wow.
In both cases, it's going to affect them for a couple of lifetimes minimum.
And most of you probably remember when Terry and I discussed this idea of adding to your karma. We don't want to do that. We want to get rid of karma.
Well, there are plenty of people that are like, oh, hell no, I want more karma. I love the drama. I love getting retribution. I love fighting with people.
Some people
Go
really
for
do.
it if that's what you want. But when you're suffering, remember what we say.
When you suffer? What do you mean?
Well, when the resultant suffering comes along, the results of
yes.
that karma,
Yes.
remember, yeah, I created this. So guess what? I get to deal with it.
Mrs. Billing is a medium, and among mediums, she is the most honest, if not the best. Go, Mrs. Billing.
Yeah, we've heard of her a few times. I don't think I mentioned, or maybe I did, that when HPB and Alcott moved to India and spent 2 weeks in London, they stayed with Dr. and Mrs. Billing. After they arrived in India, Dr. Billing apparently fell in love with a different woman, also a medium, but he had to come up with an excuse for divorcing his wife and hooking up with this other woman. So he denounced her and claimed that she was fraudulent when she was not. So he became one of the first detractors of Theosophy.
That just added to his karma.
Yeah.
A lot.
Based on the fact that he wanted a different wife and didn't want to look like the bad guy. So he made her the bad woman by ascribing activities to her of fraud. And yeah, his karma is going to reflect that.
Has Mr. Massey seen her answers to Mrs. R.C. Simpson, the Boston medium, that the questions very compromising, no doubt, for the New England prophetess and seer should be brought forward as evidence of her guilt?
Now, here again, we have almost no information on this. I couldn't even find much information about this Mrs. Simpson, except that she was a clairvoyant, that she was a medium, and that she existed. So apparently, Mrs. Billing, who is honest, was trying to point out some of the fraudulent activities in the other mediums. And so he's going to discuss a little more about that.
Why, if she's honest, hasn't she exposed all such false mediums for the public good? That may be the question to be asked. She tried to warn her friends repeatedly, with the result that friends fell off, and she herself was regarded in the light of a slanderer, a Judas. She tried to do so indirectly in the case of Miss Cook.
Now, we're talking about Mrs. Billing trying to warn other people about fraudulent mediums.
Ask Mr. Massey to recollect what his feelings were in 1879, at the time he was investigating the materialization phenomena of that young lady, when told by Mrs. Billing guardedly and by HPB bluntly that he was mistaking a piece of white muslin for a spirit. Oh my gosh.
Now, this is something that the fraudulent mediums used quite often. They would always operate in a dark room and sometimes behind a screen.
Oh, geez.
But they sometimes used these gauzy type pieces of fabric suspended and moving around to simulate spirits. And in the dark, a lot of people would mistake them for spirits. So she was trying to warn against this. Miss Cook was using those methods, and not everyone believed that she was telling the truth.
In your world of Maya, which is illusion, and kaleidoscopic change of feelings. Oh my gosh. That's an excellent way to describe it.
Yeah, because nothing ever is fixed on the astral plane. It's always moving and morphing and changing.
I've never thought of it being like a kaleidoscope. In your world of Maya and kaleidoscopic change of feelings, truth is an article rarely looked for in the market. That's funny. And still to this day, who cares about the truth? We want drama. We want to get sensationalized.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. It has its seasons, but very short ones. Truth does, okay, this guy's smart. This guy. Mrs. Billing has more sterling virtues and honesty in her little finger than many of the never distrusted mediums put together. Wow. I love how blunt he is.
Yeah.
He's super direct here. I love that.
And you have to be. If you're going to be a Mahatma, you can't be damby-pamby and try to soothe people's hurt feelings. You just have to tell the truth and let people deal with it however they're going to.
She has been a loyal member of the society from the time she joined it, and her rooms in New York are the rallying center where our Theosophists meet. This is Mrs. Billing. I wish she would have been more involved then if she's this sterling person who is a medium. I wonder why she wasn't one of their bigger chela or higher chelas. Maybe she was. We just don't know about it.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Her loyalty, moreover, is one that costs her the respect of many patrons. Why does the world work that way?
Yeah. Yeah, you get punished for being honest and truthful. Yeah.
She also, unless closely watched by Ski... Who's this Ski person?
Ski is her main spirit guide. Go ahead and finish that.
Okay. She also, unless closely watched by Ski, can turn a traitor, precisely because she is a medium, though it is not likely she would do it. Nevertheless, she is incapable of either a falsehood or deceit in her normal state.
In her normal state. And I think that was actually one of the problems, was the fact that she was a medium and was open to so many events and things going on the astral plane. It makes it very difficult. It's actually easier to work with chelas who are not yet clairvoyant, because then they're more trainable. If they're already clairvoyant, like Fern was, it's very iffy as to whether or not they can be trained to stay away from that.
It's a process of unlearning.
Long enough, yes. Unlearning, exactly.
This is actually an interesting concept. So Mrs. Billing was a Theosophical member for a long time, and she's a medium who I would imagine makes a living doing that, probably. And the masters were okay with a member being a medium?
Yeah, as long as they were truthful and honest, yeah.
So she's not going to hold up that gauze and say, oh, it's a ghost.
No, absolutely not. No, they would never tolerate anything like that.
Okay.
So Ski, her spirit guide, was short for Skiwaki, an American Indian, apparently. And that was her main spirit guide for Mrs. Billing.
Well, this is also curious, though. She's a member of the TS, and she has a spirit guide.
Well, so did St. Moses. He had a few of them, but mostly Imperator.
But the masters don't love this. I mean, but I guess they can't force.
Well, they tried to use it at first as a stepping stone to get them away from mediumship, away from spiritualism, and to teach them the truth.
Right.
But it didn't work out that way. So Ski was actually a very good influence on her. He was also occasionally used by the Mahatmas to deliver messages.
Wow.
And we're going to find out soon. KH is going to say that Ski has more than once served as a carrier and even mouthpiece for several of us. In a letter to Mrs. Hollis Billing, HPB claimed that Ski was not really a disembodied spirit guide. So why don't you read this section here that's an extract from that letter.
Why, for pity's sake, do not you tell people the truth about our brother Ski, as you told me, as you and he know it to be the truth? Why allow people to believe he is a disembodied spirit when he is a living spirit who lived and will live for as many 100 years as he likes, putting his body away to sleep whenever tired of earthly life and roaming in the interplanetary worlds as much as he likes? Why should you conceal from those who are prepared to receive the truth that he was an initiate and knew more than all their medicine men put together? Our brothers know him, and he knows them. Moria is his greatest friend, as you know. Moria wants Ski to come out bravely and tell the world the truth.
So, for some period of time, this Ski was used by the Mahatmas and by one of the adepts even as a method of contacting individuals. The unfortunate thing, though, is that that wasn't always consistent. He was also used by other entities, too. The same with Imperator. At one point, one of the Mahatmas, or a high member of the hierarchy, was using that Imperator entity as a means of communicating with Saint Moses. But the problem is they have no discernment. They can't figure out when it's one of the adepts operating and when it's just some random Joe Schmo on the astral plane.
The difference between a disembodied spirit and a living spirit. Disembodied means the person died and their spirit is active. Mm-hmm. A living spirit means there's a physical body on the earth somewhere, sleeping or in a state of meditation, and his higher vehicles, his higher koshas are being used. So he's alive somewhere.
Right. And whoever this adept was that was using Ski as one of his methods to communicate could apparently put his physical body to sleep for long periods of time, much longer than KH's 90 days that he did it, and travel interplanetary space.
But it sounds like he's been alive for hundreds of years.
Right. But how many hundred? Who knows? And maybe he's changed physical bodies more than once.
Wow. So he was probably somewhere in the North American continent, far away from society in a rural teepee somewhere, sleeping.
Possibly. In one of the letters that HPB wrote to Sinnett, she mentions that some of the chelas in Mongolia were great friends with the adepts in the Americas, in Mexico and in Peru and in other parts of the Americas. There is a brotherhood, or was, I don't know if it's still there, in the Americas, and according to some people, in the Yucatan.
Okay.
So that was confirmed by HPB, that there are adepts and have been in America for hundreds of years,
so
most likely.
Skiwaki might have been part of one of those brotherhoods. We know the one in Egypt that communicated with our Mahatmas sometimes.
Yes, and that's going to come up again here.
Okay. So we just finished learning that Mrs. Billing is incapable of telling a falsehood or deceit in her normal state. So she was a trance medium then?
I'm not sure if she was or not. I can't say for sure.
I cannot but feel repulsed, going into particulars about this, the various phenomena that may have occurred. They are the playthings of the novice, and if we sometimes have gratified the craving for them, as in Mr. Alcott's case, and to a lesser degree your own at the beginning, we do not feel responsible for continually explaining away deceptive appearances due to mixed carelessness and credulity or blind skepticism. For the present, we offer our knowledge, or some portions of it at least, to either be accepted or rejected on its own merits, independently from the source from which it emanates. Okay. In return, we ask neither allegiance nor loyalty, nor even simple courtesy, No, we would rather have nothing of the sort offered, since we would have to decline the offer.
Yeah, they don't want anything. They have something to give other people. They're not asking for anything in return. And they're trying different avenues, most of them without much success. So when one fails, they go on and try something different.
We have in view the good of the whole association of earnest British Theosophists and care little for individual opinions or the regard of this or that member. Our 4 years of experience has sufficiently delineated the future of the best possible relations between ourselves and Europeans to make us still more prudent and less lavish of personal favors.
So it has been 4 years since the British Theosophical Society was formed.
It is sufficient for me to say that Ski has more than once served as carrier and even mouthpiece for several of us. And that, in case Mr. Massey mentions the letter from a Scotch brother, it was genuine. So in Scotland?
So apparently there is a Scotch brother. We learned in a previous session that there are 2 English adepts who apparently declined to have anything to do with this. They didn't want to deal with the Europeans that they knew too well.
They already knew. They were living there. They knew this isn't going to work. This ain't going to work.
And now we find that there's also a Scotch brother as well.
My goodness. Wow. So Mrs. Billing was already in touch with, I guess we can consider Ski in that. Was he an adept?
At times it was an adept that she was dealing with. Absolutely.
But Ski, okay, so Ski himself, well, wait a minute. Wasn't he one of the brothers in the American Lodge?
Well, Ski is an entity on the astral plane, but at times he was used as the vehicle for a brother, an adept, to communicate.
Right, but he, being a living spirit, means he has a physical body.
Well, the adept does.
Okay.
It gets confusing.
Yes.
It does.
To deliver it to him mysteriously, we, including the Scotch brother, refused point blank, since, notwithstanding Upasika's passionate prayers, to make a few exceptions in favor of C.C. Massey, her best and dearest friend, whom she loved and trusted so implicitly that she offered to accept 1 year more of her long, dreary exile and work far away from her final goal if we would just consent to gratify him with our presence and teachings.
Yeah, a very strange and interesting comment he makes here. Her long and dreary exile. And I'm wondering if that was the period around 1875 when she was going through these horrible trials in Philadelphia.
The white dog situation.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And just in general, before the Theosophical Society was founded, just a few months before, but she went through some excruciating trials that she was afraid could end up in death.
She didn't do any other kind of journey or exile after that point, right? I mean, she did that earlier in her life where she was gone for a while, traveling and visiting with masters.
I'm wondering, too, at this point, if part of her exile was the fact that for a long period of time, it was the Egyptian brothers that were working with her, and that she was exiled from the Tibetan brothers for a period of time to atone for previous sins. Remember, she said, I know for what I suffer. Yeah. So it's mysterious, but she knew what it was all about. And she said, look, I will take on 1 more year of this exile if you will just make some exceptions in the case of C.C. Massey, because she just loved him more than anything else, and she wanted him to succeed. He didn't seem to be quite as concerned about it as she did.
Notwithstanding all this, we were not allowed to waste our powers so recklessly. Madam B, here's another name for her, Madam B, I don't think I've heard him say that before, was therefore left to send it by post, or if she preferred it, to go by ski.
All right, so She wanted them to deliver it in some miraculous way. They're like, no, we're not going to waste our energy on that. But you can either send the letter by post or you can have Ski deliver it if you want.
Moria having forbidden her to exercise her own occult means. Surely no crime can be ascribed to her unless absolute and fervent devotion to a great idea and those whom she regards as her truest friends is now considered an offense. Which I hope it's not.
Right. No, she was very passionate about certain people. C.C. Massey, for one, and Staten Moses. She adored these people. She really wanted them to succeed.
Mm-hmm. And now I hope I may be relieved of the necessity of going into detailed explanation about the matter of the famous Massey billing letter. Let me only point out to you the impression made on anyone with a fair, unbiased mind who happens to read Mr. Massey's letter and the lame evidence contained therein.
So, an event happened during a seance, I guess, and it involved Mrs. Billing and C.C. Massey and other people, and it involved a letter that was placed before, I believe, C.C. Massey. I could be wrong. We'll find out. But they were convinced that it proved that Mrs. Billing was a fraud. And KH is saying, no, she's not a fraud, and I'm going to explain to you.
My goodness. And then we have some numbered items here.
Three items.
1. No clever medium bent on carrying out a previously concocted plan of deception would have the idiotic idea of placing before him with her own hands any article, a minute book in her case, in which the tricky phenomenon was to take place. If she is a fraud and unscrupulous deceiver in one thing, she must have been in many others.
And that's true. Someone who is honest very seldom commits fraud one time and then never again. It's like once they start doing it, becomes kind of a habit.
You broke the seal.
Yeah, exactly.
Her husband is the only one, he who ruined her and now dishonors her, who accuses her of being a trickster. That's so terrible. Just because he wanted another wife.
Yeah, lust.
He's going to have some problems later. HPB wrote to him the most violent letters of reproach and insisted upon his expulsion from the society. He hates her. But HPB.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the use of looking for further motives?
Yeah. He was dead set on wrecking her reputation and the Mahatmas because she called him out on his perfidy, and he didn't like that.
Of course not.
So, of course, he's got to try to cast aspersions on HPB and the Mahatmas.
Number 2, Mr. Massey is but half a prophet when saying that he supposes, quote, you will be told that these things were occult forgeries. No, the message on the back of Dr. Wilde's letter is in her own handwriting, and also the first portion of the letter copied and now quoted by him for your benefit, the most damaging portion in his opinion, and no harm in it as far as I see, as explained already. She does not want him to know that she used Ski, whose entity he was known to distrust. The shortcomings and crimes of several other Skis having been attributed to the real Ski, and Mr. Massey is unable to recognize one from the other.
Yeah, that is his chief defect, his lack of discernment. Right. And the same with Staten Moses.
Mm-hmm. In her loose, careless way, she says, let him think what he likes, but he must not suspect you have been near him with Ski at your orders. Thereupon, Mrs. Billing, the clever impostor, hardened and experienced in deceit, according to C.C. Massey, does precisely that, which she is plainly asked not to do. That is, she hands him the very book in which Ski had placed the letter. Very clever.
So she was completely unaware that Ski, unknown to her, had put a letter from this Dr. Wilde, who was, I think, still the president of the British TS at that point, and HPB called him an ass. And so Mrs. Billing was not being deceitful, and KH is explaining that.
Number 3, he argues that even if otherwise conceivable, the occult forgery, the later contents of the letter were inconsistent with the supposed object, for it went on to speak of the TS and of the adepts with apparently genuine devotion.
So once again, they have no discernment. If they were able to analyze things accurately, without any filters and any preconceptions, they would see things as they are. But they twist things around in their mind to suit their own purposes.
Mr. Massey, I see, makes no distinction between an occult and a common forger, such as his legal experience may have made him acquainted with. An occult forger, a dugpa, would have forged the letter precisely in this tone. He would never have been guilty of being carried away by his personal grudge, so as to deprive his letter of its cleverest feature. The TS would not be shown by him to be, quote, a superstructure built upon fraud, end quote. And it is the very opposite impression that is its crown. Half of the letter is a forgery, and a very occult one. Mr. Massey may perhaps believe me, since it is not that portion which concerns him that is denied. LL is nobody, living or dead, certainly not Lord Lindsay. Since he was not known to HPB, she had not then, nor had she ever since then, the least concern about his lordship.
So obviously the letter referred to LL. Normally that would be the London Lodge, but we don't have a London Lodge just yet. So they thought maybe it's Lord Lindsay, and he's saying, no, it's not referring to Lord Lindsay, but something else.
This portion bears so much the impression of clumsy fraud upon its face that it could have deceived nobody but one whose mind was already prepared to see fraud in Mrs. Billing and her ski. So, yeah, if someone wants to see it, this will be the reason.
They will always find an excuse to see what they want if they're dead set on finding certain things a particular way.
Mm-hmm. I am done. And you may show this to your friend, Mr. Massey. His personal opinion about me and the brothers can in no way influence the promised teachings through your friendly agency. Yours, KH.
So, yeah, we kind of get the feeling that KH is becoming pretty disgusted at this point.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that Moria has pretty much retired, taken himself out of the picture quite some time previous, during the period when they were trying to save Hume and he declined to be saved. He wanted his revenge instead. So now we're seeing that the work that Hume has been doing to try to dissuade people and try to convince them of the bad influences of Theosophy is having an effect. He's very powerful. He's very persuasive, and he can change people's minds. So he is putting that to good use, he thinks. And all it is doing is making the Mahatmas think again about whether or not this was a very good idea.
This being the entire Theosophical Society.
Yeah. Yeah, it isn't looking very good at this point. Yes, they have a bunch of branches. However, none of them are very active. None of them are really doing anything on their own. They're waiting for material from some other source. We've got only 2 books at this point. We've got Isis Unveiled and we've got The Occult World. And that's it.
What do you think the lodges should have been doing, though? I mean,
Well, there's not a whole lot that they could. For example, the American lodges, and that's where Judge was, the American lodges were desperate for a ritual. They had talked about it when they were still in New York City, and he's like, when am I going to get that ritual? We need something to go on.
I wonder if they had practices to do, like meditation techniques, or if they were even asked to sit and meditate every day on love, or I don't know if that was even a thing.
I don't think so. I don't think there was enough material yet.
Clearly, there wasn't like a study course presented. Of course, not that. They could have studied the 2 books that were available, but other things that a theosophical group could do is just make it a point to meditate either together or at home alone. But at least that's a daily thing, or maybe altruism, maybe outreach, maybe, I mean, I'm not sure what they would have even done.
They really needed someone who had some insight, who was a great organizer. And they were hoping that that was Alcott, but he was good at putting together branches, but he wasn't really good at giving them the motivation to continue on their own. They would fall into non-use as soon as the founders left the area.
But even Alcott didn't have that type of deep insight that would be needed to, it's basically furthering a spiritual movement in the world. That takes someone like HPB or the masters themselves to inject the energy into that. Like, what do they do? I mean, it's like a new religion. What is it? Unless you have a Jesus figure or someone teaching you what it is to do. They didn't really have that guidance. Really.
No, and we see how difficult that is. Buddha probably did the best of that, but he was a Buddha. He wasn't just a Mahatma.
He wasn't able to relate to them in a way that everyday people needed. He was so far different, so far advanced.
Yes, and so he did leave a lasting impression. Jesus, for example, was a Mahatma who was very likely sometimes overshadowed by the Lord Maitreya, but we don't have a good record of what he actually preached.
This is actually a really good topic, and maybe we can get into it more next time, but what was KH and Moria, of course, to some extent, thinking the lodges are doing every time they get together and meet? I mean, they obviously had the impetus to create the society, and they had the best intentions, obviously, and we know what the teachings are, but what were they supposed to be doing during their meetings?
They were on their own, basically. Now, they did have all of the articles that were coming out in the Theosophist, and some of them did make use of those, but other than reading them and discussing them, and they were all over the place. There was no consistency. And remember, Hume complained about the Theosophist being a pile of manure. And K.H. agreed. He said, yeah, or it may have been Moria. He said, yeah, it is a pile of manure. And yet, if you would take the time to sift through it and look carefully, you would find some nuggets of real wisdom among all of that manure.
Were there, as far as you're aware, any type of like CC&Rs or governing documents that were created in 1875 to like guide the groups?
It was only about the establishment of the branch. They had rules about what you could and could not do, but there was no directions, no guidelines about this is how you conduct a meeting and this is what you discuss. Now, in hindsight, it appears to me, and I am probably wrong, that one of the very best things they should have done and could have done is to focus on Raja Yoga.
Well, the actual teachings, of course. Yes, for sure.
Purification. That is the one thing that is today still missing in most of the Theosophical Society groups. The purification that you need to make any real progress.
It's mentioned, it's there, it's just, I guess, not like emphasized.
Right. No, they did mention it off and on, periodically, but remember, HPB never got to that. It was going to be the 3rd volume of The Secret Doctrine, which never came about. I think that's what is missing still today.
Maybe Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth and Ancient Wisdom for a New Age can be the 3rd volume.
Well, and we have presented that as a great asset to Theosophy. Theosophy has all of the theory, but we don't have much practical suggestions. Eckhart Tolle's teachings and Raja Yoga supply the missing parts.
Do you know at all what HPB's relationship was to the Yoga Sutras at the time? There probably were some books on the sutras.
There were not nearly as many as we have now.
Right.
Her niece married
Charles Johnston.
He studied Sanskrit. He wrote a commentary on the Yoga Sutras and
wow.
on several other things.
HPB's niece's husband.
Yes.
Well, I love that we have Alice Bailey's version, or not version, offering on the Yoga Sutras. That's a gem.
Yes, that's another good one.
And by the way, to recap, the Yoga Sutras is Raja Yoga, just so we're clear on that. Raja Yoga, the teaching is from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras.
Yes, based on that.
Yes, basically. I didn't mean to interrupt you, though.
Yeah, just one quick note.
Yes.
If you believe what Alice Bailey said, DK did the translation from Sanskrit to English, but that's all he did. And then she supplied the commentary. So that's the one book where they collaborated. One did one part, she did the other. On her other books, there are about 4, I think, that she wrote entirely on her own. All of the rest, if you believe her, were dictated to her by DK. We'll cover more about that at some point. That's probably enough for one day.
Yes, it is.
Anyway, this again is kind of difficult because we don't have all of the background, but we still can use that story to glean some more insight into how the Mahatmas operate. And that's what we're really focusing on in these lessons. How do they operate in life? How do we become more like them?
And thank you for bearing with us. We had several different rabbit holes that we explored today, but we think it all supports our goal here. So thank you.
Yes, and stick with us. We'll be here again for session 69.
Right. Thank you.